You're listening to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community with your host, Ben Wolf.
And welcome to the Win-Win podcast. This is Ben Wolf. In our very interesting and unusual episode today, we're going to talk about whether fractional integrators, aka COOs, compete with EOS implementers. So sure to be an interesting topic today. This episode of the Win-Win podcast is sponsored by Fractional Leadership, which is a community of fractional executives, both firm owners, solo practitioners, to allow them to learn from each other, connect, level up their game, and connect with a vetted group of peers to get better and find their tribe. So that is the sponsor here. So if you're a fractional executive or know and love someone who is a fractional executive, again, whether part of a firm, owner of a firm, or a solo practitioner, whether doing so relatively recently or been doing it for many years, check out fractionalleadership.io. It's more about that, fractionalleadership.io, about that community. And so with that, I want to get into introducing our guest today, who is actually going to interview me. So I'm going to be handing over the reins today to a woman who in 2015, she and her husband bought a flexible printing packaging company. 2 years in, because they were struggling, they implemented EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System, which is a business management system for small and mid-sized businesses. They implemented EOS. Within 3 years, they turned around the business and grew it from 30 to 100 employees and from 10 to 100 million in revenue.
30 million in revenue.
Did I say, what did I say, 100? I meant to say, yes,
Yeah.
10 to 30 million in revenue. She went on to afterwards become a professional EOS implementer herself. Her name is Rachel Lebowitz. You can find out more about her at eosworldwide.com/Rachel-Lebowitz, Lebowitz. You got to put the dash in there or else it doesn't work. I mean, of course, you could just search for her on their website, eosworldwide.com, search for Rachel Lebowitz, Lebowitz. So thanks for doing this.
Thank you so much, Ben, for having me. I've enjoyed our relationship, since I've become a EOS implementer, and I always find our conversations very insightful. So I'm happy to do this.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, look, you're, we want to talk about this, something that, I've seen comes up in conversations, with some business owners, with some EOS implementers. Maybe there's some bad actors out there, people who aren't necessarily always doing the right things, give some of the others of us a bad name. People may know that I have, probably the largest fractional integrator or COO firm out there at the moment of this recording. We've got 12 team members, experienced executives, owned and run businesses, acting as fractional integrator or COO for multiple clients at a time. So, I know I guess I'll hand it over to you in terms of answering some of these questions. Do fractional integrators compete with EOS implementers, or any other questions that you want to bring up or that is, that might be coming up in the EOS implementer community? I'll do my best to be transparent and let's talk it through.
Sounds great. I'm not one to shy from controversy, so you've got the right candidate. Do we need to give a little introduction about what an integrator is, or most people listening understand the role of an integrator?
Sure. Why don't you give an introduction about what it is?
So an integrator is usually called the COO, but really it's the person that keeps the sales and marketing, operations, finance, HR, however your company is structured, it keeps them all in sync, right? They're like the conductor of the orchestra. So they are accountable for, holding high-level C-suite people accountable and removing obstacles and barriers that come up. They're more logical, right? They're detail oriented. They're usually very good at following through project, whereas visionaries are usually owners of businesses, right? But owners and founders, visionaries, are usually more high level. They're 30 feet at top. They come to every meeting with 15 great ideas. Not all of them are good or even executable. So the integrator's job is to take those ideas, research them, lay them out, make a plan, and follow them through. And we've seen in our personal business, Polycraft, such amazing growth with our integrator. She is a godsend for us. And it's made such a big difference in our personal life and our business because she is the person that grounds the business. When our visionary, my husband, has this awesome idea and we're at the danger of taking the whole business and veering focus, she's the one that keeps us focused. So that's a very high level description of what an integrator is.
All right.
Now,
And an implementer?
so an implementer is a person that's a teacher, facilitator, or coach. They're certified by EOS worldwide, and they come in and work with the leadership team and help them get three things. We call it vision, traction, and healthy. So they help everybody in the organization get on the same page on the vision. Where are we going and how we're going to get there, right? Oftentimes you have sales and marketing, operations, finance, HR, and what I find is that they're leading three type of businesses within one organization because there isn't enough communication and alignment. So we create an alignment. And then after that, we create accountability to that alignment. So people are actually executing on that vision because you know what? Most business owners, they have a vision. They tend to not share the vision. They think they're sharing it, but they're not. And then they find themselves 5 years later where sadly they don't achieve that vision. So we create this plan and alignment and accountability to get people to execute on the vision. And then the last thing is creating an open, honest, healthy environment where people feel free to raise questions, comments, concerns, ideas for the greater good of the company. And the integrator is a huge factor in this because they're usually the one that holds people accountable. Visionaries are more emotional. They don't like to have hard conversations. So integrators are the ones that usually do that. Now that we know what a visionary integrator is, I feel like, can we stop the conversation here? Because that's totally like defining the difference between an implementer and an integrator, right?
Right. Well, there's another concept, right? Of if you don't have or can't find or can't afford the right full-time integrator, and sometimes people use a fractional integrator. There's many of them out there. So I guess and obviously my firm is one of them. That we have 12 of us doing that. But what questions as an implementer? What questions do you have for me, or what challenges do you have for me about fractional integrators?
Right. And to start off this conversation, I know from talking to you that you refer so many businesses to work with implementers. You actually prefer that, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's obviously for multiple reasons. I guess number one is, look, EOS worldwide officially does allow self-implementation, right? And the what's it called? Mark Winters, talks about how an integrator is inside the business. They have a role within the accountability chart, within the organizational chart of the business. And whether that role is being filled by someone fractionally, you might be working in that role in a couple of businesses, or whether it's filled by somebody full-time, they still have that role in the accountability chart as the integrator. While it's technically possible to self-implement, and maybe in some instances that might be appropriate, it's hard. It's hard to be doing a good job where you have to continually switch hats. Like if you're getting your integrator, and it's the same thing for an internal full-time integrator who has to self-implement. It's the same issue, which is if you're trying to like teach the EOS tools, maybe you went to base camp or whatever it is, you're trying to teach the EOS tools and self-implement, and you're there as the facilitator, you're the dumb guy with the marker, you don't have an opinion, to use that Mike Payton phraseology. Well, like you don't have an opinion about what we do. You're kind of facilitating the wisdom in the room, but then you're not really getting the full value of you as the integrator, who needs to be directing and kind of asserting their wisdom and their will as the integrator. I mean, who's hopefully good at their job. And so you're not able to fully do that, or you keep going back and forth, and you keep having to say, okay, now I'm wearing the integrator hat. Okay, now I'm wearing the implementer hat. Now I'm wearing the session facilitator hat. And it's confusing. I think that sometimes it might be necessary, and look, it's the best situation available in certain circumstances, because you can't always do can't always do the ideal, but it's hard. And I think that it may take away from your ability to effectively teach and facilitate the session, the quarterly or the annual, and or the implementation session. And I think it can also take away your ability to effectively be the integrator. You're not contributing as much as the integrator. So definitely, I also see it as a red flag. Sometimes if you have a big business, maybe they got 50, 60, 100, 150 people, but they want to say like, oh, hey, can you just implement for us too? So you don't have to also have an implementer. I see that as a red flag. Like, they've got enough money. Like, it's not like they can't afford it. It tells me they're not really invested in their own success, which means that as the integrator, they're gonna talk the talk. They're like, yeah, they just want to make things go away, but they don't actually want to do the work or make the commitments to make the kind of changes necessary to achieve their own dreams. I mean, and their own desires and goals. And so if they're not really committed to their own success and they want to like cheap out, that's like a red flag for me. I think just even to be an integrator in that situation, that they're not going to be committed enough to their own success.
You gave me so much food for thought, because this opens up a whole much greater conversation. So first of all, I want to go back a minute and say, as implementers, we have three roles, and that is to be teachers, facilitators, and coaches. So we teach the EOS system with the goal of graduating our clients. We take the psychology of creating independence, not codependence. So we never, and as a facilitator, our job is to facilitate healthy discussions. As we always say that the answers are in the tools, right? So we always come back to the EOS tools, and the answers are usually in the room. I always tell people, if you're smart enough to run a business, you're most probably smart enough to figure out the answers. You're just not taking the time to sit down and think critically and strategically. So my job is, as an outsider, the last role is I play a coach, and I could say, well, from where I stand, this is what I see. And I tell them what I observe, and then I help them figure out their best decision. We never consult. Consultants tell people what to do. We don't tell people what to do. So now if you're the integrator and the facilitator, you're kind of now stuck in the weeds, and you're stuck in their business, and you don't get that objective view. You don't get to be that coach, right? If you're hiring a coach and then the coach comes into the game with you, he's not a coach anymore. So that is where the strong separation is between implementer and integrator. I wanted to clear that up, right?
Okay.
So now, which leads me to this question of fractional integrators. I know that you also work off the psychology that you want to graduate, right, your clients. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What does that usually look like?
Yeah, I think that the ultimate goal is to have an integrator who is eating, sleeping, breathing, drinking the business, the Visionaries business. And so I think in many situations, if they're big enough to need an experienced integrator and a strong leader and a strategic partner, but they're not big enough to be able to afford that $200,000 or $300,000 plus benefits, maybe equity and taxes, etc. So you're stuck in that catch-22. Like, you can't, you're not wired, and you don't have the leadership team to move the ball forward, but you also can't afford someone who really has done this before to join you. So fractional integrator is kind of good for that bridge between those two stages. And if they could they could turn things around, get you the right leadership team in place, either level people up or replace people as appropriate at the leadership team or at other key roles, help get right and good processes and systems in place to the extent they weren't already, fix and put into place other important things that are necessary for the business, make big changes, then hopefully you can grow up to that point where you can now afford to bring in that integrator full time, ideally just in the integrator role, not also sitting in some other seat like head of ops or special projects or something like that. And
right. So in essence, you're saying that a fractional integrator speeds up the EOS process and helps companies get 100% strong in each of the 6 key components much faster.
Yeah. No, it's much, much faster because that's what it does. I mean, I would say people get to their goals 2 or 3 times faster, or they get to them versus not even getting to them at all. Because what I've seen a lot of instances of people who are implementing EOS for 1, 2, or more years, and just getting low rock completion rates, getting into these heart to hearts with their implementers because they're just not making progress. They're not, even though they're doing EOS, they know the right things to do, but they as visionary are just not wired with the ability to get stuff done or to stay focused on goals, or the leadership team members are just underperforming people, or maybe not right people, not in the right seats. And so because right people, right seats is the foundation of everything. I mean, that's the foundation of being able to get anything done, to have a self-managing business, as Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach calls it. So one of the major jobs of a fractional integrator in our engagements, and most other people out there that I talk with, one of the most important things is getting the right leadership team in place. Because very often, the people who became leadership team as the organization grew up in its earlier phases, who got you here isn't going to get you there. And so either leveling people up or making changes at the leadership team to get it to where you have a group of people that are fully owning their functions of the business. The head of marketing is like owning and marketing, is pushing marketing, pushing the visionary, pushing everybody else on whatever needs to get done. They're not waiting to be pushed and pulled by the visionary, to get stuff done. Or the head of ops is driving change, is driving improvement, driving execution, not being driven by someone else who has to motivate them or prod them. And when you have a full leadership team of people and finance and operations, sales and marketing, and whatever else you have, that's driving things, and that's what a fractional integrators, that's what we're putting into place. So without that outside push, you can have all the clarity in the world in those EOS sessions. You know what your vision is, what the rocks are, you know what you're supposed to be doing, what your core values are, but you just don't have the right people in your own leadership team to actually make that happen in between those sessions. So the fractional integrator, or just like any right RPRS integrator, is coming in and constantly pushing, and they've seen these things before. They know what's going to happen 3 steps in the future based on any decision that you are thinking of making. They're like, you'd be reinventing the wheel. I mean, with an experienced executive, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just things move faster because they can help you skip mistakes that they've already made before. They're an outsider also. I mean, not as much as the implementer, but but they are coming in as an outsider. And so they have a fresh perspective and a fresh view on things. They can call things out. And so they're able to push you. They don't have it because they're fractional. Also, they don't have a day-to-day job. Like, one of the big distractions of leadership team members is they have their rocks, but they also have their day job, whatever it is in the business, right? The head of ops, they're just trying to run ops and they're trying to put out fires all the time. Or the head of marketing or the head of finance, they're always putting out fires, or they're doing technology, or they're doing projects. There's always fires to put out. And so they always just get so caught up in the day-to-day and in putting out fires that they just never get around to spending time to work on the rocks. But when a fractional integrator is coming in, they don't have a day job. All they're focused on, they're just like pounding away again and again and again, persistently on whatever the rocks and the milestones are, on the measurables, on the issues, on smoking out issues, on pointing things out, that they're just not underwater like a lot of the other people in the business with their day-to-day and with fires. So they're able to stay focused on that, and they keep the team focused on those things. So that, they do achieve a lot more, a lot faster. And then when things are turned around enough and you got a right leadership team in place, or in place enough, then we can either elevate somebody internally, coach and transition them into the role of integrator, or help hire somebody from the outside. And in either case, sometimes sometimes you bring in somebody to just sit in the integrator role without sitting in any other seat also below the integrator. But sometimes, and also because of financial needs and costs, sometimes they do have to sit in 2 seats. So they might be the head of ops and integrator. They might be special projects and integrator. They might be something else, an integrator. I had one client where I transitioned out after 2 years as the fractional integrator, and we actually elevated, it was a technology company. We elevated the head of product to be the integrator. And he did a great job. So it's not always not always head of ops. It's not always it's not always special projects. Sometimes it's other things. But either way, if you find the right person internally, that's amazing. Or hire from the outside, and we can help make that happen. So we know what a good integrator looks like.
Right. So you're saying so many interesting things, but I want to pause and focus on one particular thing, because that's something that I've been struggling with, is that people they don't get sometimes what the integrator role is, and they use it. Some people think that integrators are personal secretaries, personal assistants. You're saying special projects, and that's interesting to me because that's kind of like a role of the integrator. Are you saying that some companies separate that role and make it a separate seat on the accountability chart?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think on the classic EOS accountability chart, like example, that right, they do put special projects under that role because very often that is a role that goes to the integrator because it's cross-functional, right? It's not specific to finance or operations or sales or marketing. It's it's cross-functional.
Let's say we're buying a new building, right? It's cross-functional because you got to figure out your finances. You got to figure out
a new market, maybe a new
exactly.
product, rolling out a CRM that affects all the departments, or a new ERP, something like that.
Right.
So yeah, very often, I wouldn't say that's necessarily inherent to the integrator role because, if you think of the integrator role, the way you described it before, it's the conductor of the orchestra. They're kind of channeling the Visionaries' energy into making sure that we're not running after squirrels. We're not getting unfocused. We're not giving everybody whiplash and starting on a new project before we even finish the last one from 2 months ago. And making sure that we have leadership management and accountability for the leadership team, that all of them are clear on what they're executing on. And yeah, I think special projects and being head of operations or VP of ops are like the two most common roles for integrators.
Do you find that
it's not practical. I would just say one other thing, which is it's not practical. If you do need, if the only kind of right person, right seat integrator that you can bring in, or that you can find, or you can afford to bring in is fractional, it's just not practical to have that person be VP of ops. Like, you really need to be there full time running that. And for special projects too. I mean, sometimes those things are just so all consuming. That's, I guess what I always say is that the integrator role, in terms of being conductor and channeling the visionary and managing the leadership team and keeping everybody synced up and keeping everybody focused, is I would say that what I call those core integrator responsibilities take up about 20% of a typical full-time integrator's time, and about 80% of the time is spent on something else, some other seat, whether that's special projects from as part of the integrator seat, or whether that's VP of ops, or whether some other role in the accountability chart where they're reporting to themselves, where they're sitting under the integrator seat in some other role. And so as a fractional, obviously, what you're giving up is you're not able to have that person full time. Otherwise, you'd be hiring them. I mean, if you could hire for someone full time, you would, but you can't for whatever reason, or you can't because you can't find them, or you can't afford it. You can't afford the right person, at least in that role. And so you have to split out those two things, and you have to have the core integrator roles done by the fractional, which is about 20% of the time. So you're getting about 20% of their bandwidth. So that makes sense. They can fill that role on a fractional basis. And then for the VP of ops, you have to have a separate VP of ops, and whoever that is. I mean, it's maybe the visionary for a few months has to sit in that role if you don't have the right person in it, or you might have the right person in it, but maybe they're kind of an underperforming person, and so you have to just kind of coach and support and kind of be a crutch for them for a few months or a few quarters until the time comes when we can make sure we do have a right person, right seat in that head of ops role. And then that's kind of how it'll go for a few months or a few quarters until you could get enough of the leadership team to be right people, right seats, really owning their roles and driving their own roles and not waiting to be driven. Where often visionaries feel like, unless I'm pushing, unless I'm using brute force, unless I'm super involved, just things stop happening. But you need a leadership team that has, as Dan Sullivan calls it, the batteries included, right? That you don't have to energize them and push them and pull them, but they're self-motivated, self-energized to do whatever function of the business they run, because they really own their roles. And so that's what you want to get into place. think it was a little bit of a
It's
tangent, but yeah.
where's my squirrel?
Yeah.
Um,
Scroll
but
alert.
that kind of, yeah, so it brings me back to this thing that do you think like a lot of companies have a misconception of what an integrator is? Like I find smaller companies assume integrators have more of assistants kind of roles.
Mhm.
As you said, special projects. So in a way, when a fractional integrator comes in, they're forcing this company to become very clear on their accountability chart on
Yeah.
like, because I'm not going to be that personal assistant for you. So who will, right? So you got to
Right.
start answering those questions.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. You can help people get a lot smarter about where their energy goes and how they spend their money because, yeah, 100%. Like if someone's reaching out to us and it seems like they need, they're kind of a smaller business, maybe they do need more of a personal assistant, maybe a higher level personal assistant, someone who could use judgment and creativity in managing their schedule or managing their projects. So yeah, we'll refer them to uh,
Assist Pro or
Assist Pro or one of these type of businesses to have higher level assistant or maybe even match up, maybe even get a higher level executive assistant, like one of those. Delegate Solutions, I think the other one is called, or Assist Pro, and there's several others. And so yeah, bring in, we'll refer them. I mean, I refer clients to Assist Pro, and I have my assistants from Assist Pro for the last 2.5 years. And so we're definitely refer people there. Sometimes we'll match. Sometimes what we started to do in one of my businesses is we match up a high level personal assistant who has maybe fewer hours that they're giving with a more process following oriented or more executive assistant or assistant or VA, maybe from the Philippines or somewhere else, what they can get for a lower price point to actually work with that other assistant. So the assistant's managing the assistant. You could, maybe they're doing 20 or 30 hours a week. And so they're able to together get a lot done. I get a lot done for you. Sometimes you have visionaries that are also in smaller companies that don't really have a leadership team. They're really more of just like a visionary with a bunch of helpers. Maybe they have 5, 10 people in the company, maybe even 15, 20 people in the company, but there's really no leadership team other than themselves. And then in those situations, and maybe, they need help with project management. They need help with kind of fractional COO type stuff, but it's more, they don't need that huge executive leader. They don't have a big organization yet. So sometimes we'll refer someone like Beyond the Chaos from Susan Fenema's company that really specializes in companies like that, where they have fractional COOs that do some of it, and they have several project managers. So they have, again, maybe it's a higher level of assistance even than Assist Pro that can help build things up. Another thing I've seen is sometimes people need a VP of Ops, and they think they can get a fractional integrator to run ops, and that's just not going to work because if you need every job, like there's stuff going on all day from morning till night, there's multiple jobs, multiple products, multiple deliveries, multiple logistics always going on. It's just not going to work to have someone do that fractionally. I mean, typically I haven't seen a situation where it will work. And sometimes people think like, oh, well, I don't have a good VP of Ops, so maybe I'll fire a VP of Ops and get a fractional integrator, because they conflate the idea of integrator with the VP of Ops. What they don't realize is those are two seats. There's the integrator seat and there's the head of ops seat. Those are two separate seats. And, so what I would encourage people to do in that situation is you really need to hire a new VP of Ops, or you need to hire a manager maybe within your ops department. You need something to handle more of the day-to-day because this is not a solve. Bringing in a fractional integrator is not a solve for that typically.
Right. So I'm assuming, I mean, I'm hearing all this and I'm like, yeah, this really clarifies this idea that integrators are very high level. They're not really day to day. They're holding people accountable. I'm assuming you make sure that your integrators are a core values match with the visionaries that you match them up. You use the people analyzer?
We typically don't actually. I mean, I guess we do still work more on gut instinct, but we use 4 main characteristics that to match people up. I would say number one is we do like a detailed discovery process with clients before we get going with them to understand kind of what's working, what's not working, what their issues are, where they want to go, like where they want this business to go, what they want to see happen, and why that's important to them, like what it means for them to achieve those things. And once we get all of that, we kind of see, okay, who from our team is best suited to help achieve those kinds of goals. So that's like number one, is like, so maybe it's really people stuff and a lot of coaching, that's like one type of thing. Maybe it's, more technical, more scientific or construction or engineering type of stuff. And just might bring in a different person who's going to be better suited for their particular goals. Look for availability. Obviously, people need to have availability and personality. That's a key component. Sometimes there's certain
That's core values, right?
Yeah, it is, I guess, but it's this. But I would say other things too. Like there's just speaking honestly, there's some women visionaries that would prefer to work with a woman. There's some men visionaries that would prefer to work with a man as the visionary, or vice versa. Sometimes, I mean, I know one EOS implementer, won't mention her name, tells me that whenever she hires an assistant, because she has an executive assistant, and she always hires a male executive assistant because whatever reasons she has. So anyway, different kinds of things. Or sometimes people are more, I don't know, just kind of more straightforward. Sometimes people are softer personality. Like, you just have to think about personality fit too, because you need to be kind of in sync with that. The integrator and the visionary really need to be in sync with each other. So I think that personality piece is important in the matching. And I guess that goes to core values, among other things. I think it's other things too. And then industry experience is sometimes relevant. So, somebody with more of an engineering, construction, logistics, manufacturing, distribution, supply chain kind of background is not necessarily going to be a good fit with a SaaS company or with a law firm necessarily. Just, with an accounting firm, it's going to be an architecture firm. It's just going to be a different kind of background. I mean, technically, yes, people issues are people issues, process is process. It's technically the same. And I know
But it
implementers are
helps.
industry agnostic. Yeah, but sometimes you can minimize the learning curve. You have the ability to you'll come in, you already know things about the business. You could just, you could just come in and plug in some of that experience. So it is sometimes relevant, sometimes less relevant, but where it's important, we definitely want to take that into account. But we do. I mean, currently not using People Analyzer, but and not all of our clients come to us already using EOS.
Right.
Some of them do, and some of them don't. They come to us because they hear about us from fractional executives, from recruiters, from an online search, or LinkedIn or something. And so sometimes people are finding us in other ways, and so for those, they'll do their EOS implementation or we'll refer them to an implementer. It'll be after the engagement starts.
Right.
In some instances.
And have you found that integrators typically have a certain Colby profile versus visionaries?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say that, well, and I'll have to make a distinction here between fractional integrators and full-time integrators, or like long-term integrators.
Okay.
I don't know if you've come across this before, but I would say that integrators typically need to be high on follow through, right? Obviously on the Colby, most are higher on the fact finder, not all. I think the follow through quality, is has the longer follow through as they on the Colby, as they say, because I know the Colby consultants call it longer and shorter instead of higher and lower because they don't want to make it seem like a judgment. But anyway, so the longer or higher fact finder I think is important. Quick start's also a bit of a mix. I think that there's a shorter or lower quick start typically for integrators, but I would say that's more important for long-term full-time integrators than it is for fractional integrators. A lot of fractional integrators, that's kind of a subset of integrators I've found, people who are attracted to this, who veer a little bit more towards the visionary side than most integrators. And I think that's because they're periodically starting with new clients. They're always looking for new challenges. They're able to, come into new situations, make quick decisions, adapt, initiate change, be very decisive, and just, and kind of continually looking for that.
They're kind of running their own business, so they have to have that quick start.
Yeah. So they need to be more in sync. Like there's just more change faster that the fractional integrator needs to be making happen relative to a regular integrator or a full-time integrator that's going to be a little more stable. There's going to be obviously there are hopefully incremental change over time and incremental improvement continually, but not as much massive change, not as quickly. And so when you look at right people, right seat, right? Also, this is something else I think that people should think about when they're thinking about the right integrator is that the idea that you can have one person that's going to be a right person, right seat when you hire them as an integrator to make massive change for 12 to 18 months and then sit back for the next 10 years and manage an organization with very little change or only incremental change over the next 10 years. The idea that you're going to have a right person who's right seat, who like loves that and wants to do that, to have one person that's going to do both and do both well, it's hard to find such a person. So that's actually another use case that I find for the idea of a fractional integrator is that, just because someone can't make massive change doesn't mean they're not a great integrator. They may be great as a long-term full-time integrator, but they may not be great as a fractional integrator. So sometimes you might want to have that person who does have that little bit more of a massive change, more of a visionary personality, higher quick start for your fractional integrator. And then when you make the bulk of your massive change and you're able to bring in that long-term integrator, then you bring in that person that's more stable, that's more stabilizing, as Colby calls it, on the low quick start side.
So are you saying that fractional integrators usually come in when companies are in desperate need of massive change?
Yes.
So give me scenarios, like what happens? Industries change, people, what's going on?
Let me think about a recent client. I'll mention one client is an HVAC company at over 50 million in revenue. And
how many employees?
It was a few months ago when they started, but I believe at the time they were around 70 or 80 people.
Because I was going to ask, what's your ideal customer look like?
Yeah.
Your ideal client? Like, when do companies outgrow a fractional integrator? With somebody with 300 employees can still use a fractional integrator? You need constant accountability.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I guess I don't know
We'll
if you
talk
want to
about
skip
that
to that
after.
question or do the
No, let's go
the other
back
question
to
first.
massive change.
Because I'm high on follow through, right? So I remembered your original question. The massive change. Yeah. So I mean, the usual situation that I've seen, there's exceptions. I mean, sometimes maybe an integrator leaves and you have a situation like that. I've seen that situation as well, but very often it's just that people naturally grew an organization. They organically grew it, and they just most of the leadership team is just not right people. So they're constantly pulled into the weeds, constantly pulled into the day-to-day, constantly pushing and pulling people to do the things that they should do, and they're just constantly finding mistakes and errors and clients getting upset and just not delivering the quality and the kind of service or product that they used to. And they're just frustrated. They're upset. They want to quit. They're like, this is not like what I signed up for when I went out on my own, or when I broke off, or when I started this business. In this instance, I think there was I think in this story with the HVAC company, there was a former partner who was handling purchasing, which is hugely important in this business. And this partner left. So now, and they picked somebody internally to do it, but this was just a profoundly underperforming person. So there's just profound frustration, not the right people, underwater, a million issues, not sure where to start, no process. I mean, business of the size that I just mentioned, right? But people go amazing. It's really miraculous how far people take their businesses without process, without right people, just through brute force, and based on past success, and just through their own commitment. It's really amazing, but people get very frustrated and disheartened. And so, I mean, at least for us, the ideal client is somebody that knows that they need help, that that wants help. They want someone to kind of lay a path and figure out what's the path through this maze of craziness, to to get to the kind of business that that maybe I think now is not even possible anymore. And somebody who's built businesses that got to where I want mine to get to before, and they could chart a path, obviously in cooperation with the visionary and the leadership team and the implementer to get there. And so we started 3 months ago with this HVAC company, and the fractional integrator who's working with them, he just told me this past week that the visionary just told him this week that, like, you changed my life.
Wow.
Like, that was a phrase he used. Like, you changed my life. Like, I didn't know, if you haven't experienced like a well-run, healthy company with like people that own their roles and good processes and systems, if you haven't experienced that before, or at least in your own company, or maybe you were a cog in one at some point in your past, but to have your own, they haven't experienced that before, it almost seems not real. It's hard to imagine that that's even possible. And so
you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. If you've never seen it personally, it's, it's hard to imagine. It sounds like a legend, a myth about some mythical business where the leadership team actually runs things, and you could take off a day or take off 3 weeks, and the business keeps humming along and keeps on growing without you. And it's hard to believe that such things exist, but we know that it does exist. And so have somebody that's built a business like that before to kind of chart you through it. That's kind of a major use case.
Right. So are you saying that when integrators come in and there's a lot of wrong people or no people, right people, right seat issues, they kind of become like a recruiter then, because they're so busy trying to help them find the right people?
Well, that's a lot of the rocks. Typically, the first few quarters is people related rocks. It doesn't mean they have to be a recruiter in the sense of an HR recruiting department. So they may own certain rocks about getting right people into certain roles, or maybe working with someone to become better. And then maybe if that doesn't work, then maybe a subsequent quarter having a people change in that. So they may own the rock of making that happen, but it doesn't mean that they do the administrative recruiting work. So they may work with a recruiting company like Keystone or Titus Talent Strategies or Vision Spark, or a contingency recruiter, or an internal HR department. Maybe there are internal recruiters that they could work with, and that they can kind of make sure that the job descriptions line up with the accountability chart, and that the core values are reflected, and that and that people know what to look for when they're whoever's doing the administrative part of it and the screening part of it, so that when you start having finalist candidates, that they can coordinate with making sure the right people get hired. But that is a major part of the role, because honestly, having right people in the right seats on your leadership team, and with your integrator, obviously, and other key roles in the organization, it's the foundation of everything else. You could start with a bunch of wrong people and start working on documenting processes and systems and computer systems and everything, and it's just going to be continually frustrating. I mean, it might be some incremental improvement, but really having great processes with wrong people is just, it's not going to change your business.
I think where we both agree on is that you need right people.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's for most clients, that's the major focus. The first few months and quarters is getting right people into place in the leadership team and in other key roles. I mean, depending on the specific circumstances.
Right. Would you say that accountability looks different with a fractional integrator versus a full-time integrator? Are they better at holding people accountable? Does it look different? Do people accept accountability from an integrator if they're fractional? Oh, you're only coming in twice a week.
I mean, it's a mix. It really depends on the circumstances. Sometimes people accept accountability from an outsider or an outside expert that's being brought in, sometimes more easily than someone they feel like they have too much familiarity with. And sometimes they will respect and kind of accept accountability from somebody on the outside more readily. Sometimes they'll see them just as an outsider and maybe a passing thing. We just have to wait it out. And, and so it may be tougher in some instances. I think it really depends on the particular leadership team members and the particular culture of the company. One thing I will say, which is like an interesting observation, is that sometimes having a full-time person in place as a manager or an integrator is actually what's the word? It actually is a crutch that enables wrong people to remain in place longer.
It creates complacency.
Yeah, because what the full-time manager will do, or the full-time leader will do, is they'll, what I call being a helicopter manager. They'll kind of hover and prevent mistakes from being made and constantly poke, to make sure things are getting done. So it's just their constant intervention that's always getting things to get done. So people have no ownership. They're not really right people. But because things are getting done and mistakes aren't getting made, or fewer mistakes are getting made because of their constant helicopter management, then they are then you may just keep the people in place a lot longer and not really ask, is this the right person? Are they good at their job? Can they own it? Where I can maybe focus on higher order activities because I'm not constantly babysitting all of my direct reports. And so, and also process issues. Sometimes you can have bad processes, no processes. And because you have full-time management, that kind of gets covered over, that gets ignored, or it gets ignored for a very long time because of this constant babysitting, this constant helicopter management. And so sometimes having a fractional integrator, because you don't have that babysitter, you don't have that constant management. So when you bring in a fractional integrator or a fractional other person on the leadership team, a fractional head of finance, fractional head of sales, a fractional CMO, or something else, CTO, et cetera, sometimes that, the only way you could create accountability is by making clear what the job descriptions are, making clear what the metrics are, making clear what the processes are, making sure people are trained on it, setting up a certain meeting cadence once a week, maybe a one-on-one once a week, maybe a team meeting once a week, maybe both. And then you set that up, right? And then can people largely now on their own, it's clear what to do. They've been trained on how to do it. It's clear what's expected. It's clear the metrics. If they're still not doing what they should be doing, then, and again, no one's there babysitting, no one's there forcing it every day, every minute. So they start underperforming. So you might say, oh, that's a problem with fractional leadership. No, that's actually finally bringing to the forefront this issue that was festering for months, maybe years until now. And just the fact that you had a fractional in there who's not constantly babysitting just forces you to realize that, my managers, my mid-level managers, my frontline employees in this department or on the leadership team are just not the right people. And now we need to solve that. And sometimes
shining a light.
Yeah, it shines a light on it, brings up things that were hidden because of helicopter management and everything. So it's like, I'm not saying you should like not hire a full-time person. You should hire fractional when otherwise you could find a great full-time person. I'm not, obviously it's better to just get the full-time person and have them be cognizant of this issue and, and just try to bring forth those issues if you can. But very often that just doesn't happen. So it is another benefit of fractional, any kind of fractional role, really, that, that can sometimes bring issues to the forefront that helicopter management was keeping kind of under the carpet until now.
It kind of like this brings our conversation full circle because I want to go back to I'm not a high on follow through, but I remembered something that you said in the beginning of the conversation. You said sometimes you have companies that have 100 employees or they're doing 100 million in revenue, but they don't want to get an implementer. They want a fractional integrator, and you see that as dysfunctional versus you're saying you have a client that has 70 employees, that's HVAC company, and they were a right client for having a fractional integrator. So how do you differentiate?
Well, we referred, or I referred a fractional, excuse me, I referred a EOS implementer into them. So, they're going to be using a professional implementer.
Right, the HVAC company.
Yeah.
Right. So when would you say a company outgrows this fractional thing? Because I see fractional as it helped smaller companies get better talent. You write that in your book, and I love that about it. So I say like there's a certain pain for a company that has 1 to 10 employees. That's where the visionary kind of has to play the integrator role. They're also they're just very in the weeds, and you kind of make decisions hiring using your gut, right? That's when you're like, in that pain. Then there's a pain 10 to 30, 40, 50 employees. Once you get 50 to 250, it's a whole different story, right? When does the using fractional kind of expire? When is it dysfunctional already?
Yeah, look, I think in the bigger companies, look, typically 70, 80 person company, $80 million, whatever, typically is going to be, less likely to auto use a fractional integrator. Sometimes that's more of a bridge solution. Like you can't find an integrator or your integrator leaves. We've had instances where we come in where it's more of a bridge situation. They had a full-time integrator, that person left. And so we bring in a fractional integrator because, again, the visionary knows themselves. They know they're not the right person for the job. And so they want a right person integrator in place so that they don't feel rushed in hiring a full-time integrator. They don't want to feel, because, oh my gosh, we don't have this. It's been 3 months. We haven't had an integrator. I can't stand this anymore. Okay, they're not perfect, but okay, fine. We'll hire that person, right? And then it's a very traumatic, bad hire potentially. So by having a great integrator in place, fractionally you can take your time, wait for the right person. If you talk to 3 finalists and they're good, but you're not sure, then you could wait. Do another round of searches, do another round of candidates. So I would say that's a benefit of it in larger companies. Sometimes, again, great integrators. I think Mark Winters in Rocket Fuel talks about how the ratio of visionaries to integrators in the world is about 5 to 1, about 1 integrator for every 5 visionaries. And so even with a bigger business, sometimes you just can't find the right person, or it takes a very long time to find the right person. And obviously, as you know, it's such a key hire. You want to make sure to find the right person. So sometimes if you can have a right person, right integrator, somebody that can keep things moving forward, and not force the visionary to take on a role that they know they don't want and have the capacity to do well, then it's a great solution for the 3, 6, 9 months, however long it takes to find the right person.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So having a fractional integrator serves different purposes in different situations, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, where do we take this from
Well, I
here?
mean, we could wrap it up now if you want, or I don't know if there's any other questions that come to mind. I know that I don't know. I mean, sometimes I hear about in the Slack channels or in conversations among EOS implementers that there is, maybe that there's that, maybe are fractional integrators like competing with the EOS implementers? Are they are they good? Are they not good? I don't know if there's any other questions along those lines that that come to mind.
So maybe so let's talk about why would anybody assume fractional integrators are competing with implementers when like you I know that you and your firm are very strong about separating the roles and being very clear. Are there situations where where it overlaps and it gets a little murky?
Yeah, I would say there are people who call themselves fractional integrator out there who I would call bad actors, right? Who just, every engagement, they want to implement EOS themselves. They don't want to work with implementers, or even if they come into a situation with an implementer, they're like, hey, why don't you let go of this implementer and let me start implementing, and and they want to basically be an outside EOS implementer besides for their quote unquote fractional integrator role. I don't think that's ethical. I don't think that represents the great fractional integrators I know out there in the industry, not just in my firm, but many others. And I even have an article on the Wolf's Edge Integrators blog about like the 5 best fractional integrators. And I didn't even include our own firm in that. I just, highlighted 5 other fractional integrators, solo practitioners or firms that I think are great people, that are real executives that really help their clients. Because we're not the only ones and we're not the right fit for everybody. But I think there's tons of great actors out there, but I think there's some that are, not honoring an EOS Worldwide's intellectual property, and trying to implement EOS on their own. And I think that, I mean, I've heard of that happening. So it's not like made up. It's not it's not completely illegitimate. But I would just think that that's why it's important to work with a company like Wolf's Edge Integrators or one of the other highly reputable fractional integrators out there, or get referrals and references from other EOS implementers who have good experience with a certain fractional integrator. So
What
that they
steps what steps do you take to not to ensure that in your practice? You have 12 integrators, right?
Yeah, well, we're not just a referral network. I mean, we operate like a firm. We're getting together every week. We're IDSing client issues together. We're developing processes together. We're a very intimate group of people, right? We work together very closely. Our all core values aligned with each other. We're a tight group. I don't have to worry that anybody in Wolf's Edge Integrators is potentially being one of these bad actors. Like that's not.
It's also as you as the visionary value so much a relationship with implementers, and you see the value of
all
bringing
of us do
that into your businesses.
Yeah, 100%. So that's so I'm not worried about it with my own firm, but there's others out there. I can't control, I obviously can't control other people out there, and no one, can't control people calling themselves that.
Right.
So
it's not about worrying about your firm, it's about what differentiates you, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's also about you can't be everything to all people, correct? And when a fractional integrator tries to be an implementer, they're trying to be everything to one business. And that's what I often say with consultants too. You can't teach EOS and then be inside the business. It gets murky.
Right. Most of the time, that's right. It's not, it's not the right thing to do. And yeah, so I guess I would just say that I think that people have that feeling sometimes because there are some bad actors out there that probably give the rest of us a bad name. So I would just say that's, that you got to just be careful who you work with. Make sure that's one of the good guys or gals. So yeah, I mean, that's really what I would say. I've had great conversations with, Jill Young and Amber Baird and other people from EOS, and always happy to answer questions from anybody if people do have concerns or whatnot. I talked to 2 or 3 implementers yesterday. I mean, just catch up calls. So it's all good stuff.
Great. I'm so happy that we had this conversation and we cleared the ear, as they call it in EOS.
Yes.
And I value the relationship with your firm. And I think that it's great to help people, because we're so much focused on independence, why not get them to their goals faster, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. I think it makes because they're more successful in their EOS implementation, not because there's, they already had a great implementer, but if they don't have the right people on their leadership team, they're not going to be very successful, and they're not going to be as fast in their EOS implementation or in the achievement of their goals. So yeah, I mean, having a right person, right seat in the integrator role, even fractionally, is going to get them there a lot faster. They're going to think, oh gosh, this EOS thing really works, and they're going to feel so much more. They're going to be, it's a tag team situation. They're going to feel so much more loyalty and appreciation and gratitude to their implementer because what they're doing is working, because they have the right people on their team. Right? Obviously, that's a predicate for that happening. But they're going to feel so much better about it. They're going to refer people more to that implementer, hopefully, because they had a good experience, and they're going to, of course, refer it to others. And if they don't have a successful experience, because even if through no fault of the implementer, but if they don't have a successful experience, if it just kind of goes quarter after quarter, not seeing a lot of, then they're going to tell their friends, it didn't really work for me. Well, again, it wasn't really EOS that didn't work for you. It was that you didn't have the right leadership team, or you didn't have the right integrator that didn't work for you. And so, I think that we can, avoid that and, really be a win-win tag team kind of situation.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Awesome. Anyway, yeah, Rachel, so I'll take back the reins again for a second. So Rachel, really appreciate you having this conversation and quizzing me and, hopefully hashing out some of the integrator implementer differences and, and potential danger points, et cetera, and potential opportunities. So really appreciate the conversation and you making the time today.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast and this was great. I think it clears up a lot.
Awesome. I appreciate it. And everybody else, I guess I think it's a little longer episode than usual, but we'll see everybody else on the other side. Thank you.
You're listening to Win-Win, an entrepreneurial community with your host, Ben Wolf.